Hello, welcome to another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting from the Jazz Standard here in New York City. Blessing the band stage this week is a.k.a. jazz master as well as pianist and composer Kenny Barron. This Philadelphia, Pennsylvania native has been on the jazz scene for well over 6 decades, and this gentleman has backed and recorded with some of the most important stalwarts of jazz, ranging from Ella Fitzgerald, Lionel Hampton, Milt Jackson, Yusef Lateef, Stan Getz, just to name the endless few. Tonight I had a chance to sit down and break bread with him to talk about his origins growing up in Philadelphia, as well as talk about some of his most important musical influences, as well as talk about his role as an educator, as well as an accompanist, and the role that he plays as a band leader. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the highlights of Mr. Kenny Barron performing live here at the Jazz Standard as part of the Pace Report here in New York City. Of Intuition on the Impulse label. And Kenny, I've got to ask you, Impulse has been a very instrumental part of how people have been hearing jazz, because it's one of a few jazz labels that are kind of in the lineage of the history. How does it feel to be on this label?
It feels great to be on this label because there's a lot of me. I go back to Train and Oliver Nelson and so much music on that label. You know, when they were in New York. I mean, now it's part of Universal, so it's I don't want to say it's French, but it is kind of. You know, it is kind of. But I'm glad they revived it. You know, I'm very happy and happy to be on that label. Yeah.
You know, Kenny, this is really kind of a new part of your life right now. You are playing with a quintet, and we're always used to hearing you play with the trio.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it before. Actually, with this same quintet, but it was a couple of years ago. We played at the Village Vanguard, I think it was. You know, and then I've had quintets before earlier. I had a quintet with Eddie Henderson and John Stubblefield and Victor Lewis and Cecil McBee. So I love that format as well. It gives me a chance to write more.
Now, tell me about playing with the trio versus playing with a quintet or quartet. How do you space yourself as a pianist as well as a composer, as well as allowing the musicians to interpret your music?
Well, one of the things that I don't tell them what to play or how to play. You know, I think that's important. You know, when you hire people, you hire them for what they bring to the table. So that's number one. You know, they get to do whatever they want to do, and I enjoy listening to them. So I like to hear them solo as well. You know, I think that's important because they add to the whole the whole thing. You know, rather than just simply playing melodies all night. So I like to be generous in terms of allowing my sidemen to solo. You know, in terms of I don't really have a preference if it's a trio or quintet or quartet. Trio, I tend to play. I think I tend to play more standards, more straight ahead maybe. And again, with quartet or quintet, I may concentrate a little bit more on composing for that particular sound.
The art of composing at 70-something years young. Tell me, is it easier or is it harder as you find that the game is changing?
Actually, it gets harder for me. It gets harder to focus and just take the time and, okay, I'm going to do this. So sometimes, you know, as you get older, you got more stuff happening in your life. You know, there's a lot going on, and so you got to separate that from what you want to do. From your writing, you want to write, so you got to say, okay, I'm going to close the door and I'm going to write now. You know, then you got to, I got to take out the trash. Things like that can cause you to lose focus momentarily. So it's just all about being able to focus on what you're doing, you know. So as I get older, sometimes it's a little harder, you know, just to do that.
Touring, are you doing more dates or are you finding yourself taking it a little more easier now?
I'm actually working quite a bit. Quite a bit, you know. I mean, there've been some I've had some downtime, you know, like 3 weeks, which I actually love to have that. And my wife hates it. Yeah, don't you want to go out and hear some music? You know, I feel like I kind of get underfoot when I'm home for a long time, you know. But yeah, I'm fortunate. I've been working quite a bit, you know, going to Europe and going to Australia for the first time I've never been in May. So I'm in Australia, New Zealand. I'm looking forward to that, you know.
Kenny, let's talk about some of your humble beginnings in Philadelphia. You and your brother, your older brother Bill, were really kind of steeped in the rich, traditional, and also the great musicians that came out of Philadelphia. How was it that your brother exposed you to the music?
Well, it was my brother because he had a whole bunch of 78 records. You know, Dexter Gordon, Fats Navarro, Bird and Dizzy. So, and I think one of my favorites, and I'm going back to I was about 10, was Miles Davis, Birth of the Cool. He had that record. And for some reason or other, I was very attracted to that sound. You know, so I would always go find that record and put it on, Birth of the Cool. You know, but he was very influential. You know, we would talk about music, and he got me my first gig. You know, playing in the band that he was playing with. I think I was 14, something like that.
How did piano come into your psyche?
It was required. You know, my mother and so I had two brothers and two sisters. So my mother and sisters that everybody study the piano. I mean, you didn't have to do it for a career, but you know, you used to have that understanding of the piano, you know, and understanding of music. So my brother continued, and as did I. So we were the only two that became professional musicians.
You know, your school was the band stage, New York City, trial by error, and
That's it. That's it. Yeah. I mean, I didn't go to a formal, in terms of education, I didn't go to a formal school until much later, actually. Much later, after I'd been in New York for quite some time, I decided to go back to school. But yeah, on the job training, I think that's important. That's how I learned, basically.
you know, Roy Haynes just turned 92 years old, and that was one of your first gigs when you
Right.
got here in New York. I got to ask you because we're going to talk about accompanist because you've accompanied a lot of musicians throughout your career, but you happened to play with Buddy Rich as well as Roy, and what was it like playing with him? Because he has a very unique drumming style that's very unorthodox, like some of his other contemporaries.
You know, Roy?
Yeah.
Yeah, Roy was very unique in the sense that I remember He would take fours or trade fours or eights, and I almost had to count out loud, you know, because he would always be right, mind you, but I wasn't used to that. When I first started, I wasn't. I was used to maybe somebody like Philly Joe played very, very evenly, and you knew where he was. Roy sometimes would throw you a curveball. So but again, when it was time to come back in, he'd be right on it. But I'd be somewhere else sometimes. That's why I had to count. I had to start counting out loud, or at least not out loud, but in my head, I had to keep counting until I finally started to be able to feel where he was. It took some time actually, because he's very tricky.
Everyone knows your foray with the great James Moody. He was a mentor to you. And from what I'm understanding, he was the one that recommended you to play with Dizzy.
He is. That's true. He was in town with Dizzy, and I ran into him on Broadway, and he told me that Dizzy was looking for a pianist. As Lalo Schifrin was leaving, so he told me, "Why don't you come by and talk to?" I came by and talked to Dizzy, and Dizzy hired me. Never heard me play a note. Just hired me on Moody's recommendation.
I have to ask you because Dizzy was so music forward, and what I mean by that is that he brought the Afro-Cuban flavor to jazz, and he also played big band. He also played bebop. He played post-bop. What was it like getting acclimated, one, to his compositions, and also learning the music and the techniques from Dizzy?
Well, it was great learning the music. My first gig with him actually was in Cincinnati, and I had no rehearsal. It was like, okay, we're leaving, and the rehearsal was in the taxi cab, with Chris White explaining certain things about the music to me. But again, once we hit the bandstand and I could hear where everything was, it wasn't really a problem. Just learning a lot of things I knew anyway, just from listening to the radio and listening to recordings. So I knew a lot of his music, a lot of his older stuff, a lot of the bebop things, and so I knew some of that. I knew the feeling, It was my first opportunity to play like Brazilian music was with him, and any kind of Latin music was with Dizzy.
I was going to ask you because that's part of your signature. Next to Compton, you do blend Brazilian with post bop and bop in your style. How was the Brazilian style of music very influential as far as your playing?
Well, I love it. I love the rhythms. I love the harmonies, and I think that's what attracted me to it. And the band that first got me. I mean, again, I played some Brazilian music with Dizzy, but I heard Brazil '65. I was in San Francisco one time and heard them on the radio, and Sergio Mendes, and I just fell in love with the music, and that made me investigate it even more then. Because I didn't really investigate it. I was just, oh, we're playing these tunes. But once I heard Brazil '65, I heard Brazilian people playing Brazilian music, and it's a totally different thing.
How did that translate, some 30 years later, 25 years later when you played with Stan Getz? Because, he was part of that whole wave with Jobim.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I was with him, people would ask him, because he had a big hit with the Desafinado. He refused to play it.
Really?
Yeah, because I guess because he had played it so much.
Right.
So he didn't want to play it anymore. Well, we did some other Brazilian stuff.
Great.
So it was beautiful playing with it because he's got that feeling, the sound, and the very beautiful sound. And his sound works so well with Brazilian music. And I brought in some pieces, original pieces that we recorded and played. So it was beautiful.
The thing about you is that you're an educator now, and you're leading your band, and you're really kind of grooming musicians for the next level as far as becoming musicians. What were some of the things as an accompanist that you had to do as a pianist, as well as a composer, as well as a friend to these musicians, to maintain your place in the band stage?
That's a big question. What did I have to do? I don't think I did anything special other than just be myself. I really don't. In terms of being an accompanist, I like being a team player. So in terms of that, I think it's important if I'm playing for a singer, if I'm playing for someone else soloing. I think it's important to realize that spotlight is not on you at that moment. So it's about support, and that's the word, I think, support. You want to support this person in front of you, because when they're soloing or singing, for that moment in time, whoever the band leader is, for that moment in time, they're the band leader. In my mind, they're the band leader. So you have to support what's happening in front of you.
As a leader, what do you stress to your rhythm section?
I think again, I don't want to tell them anything. I really don't. This we have music and we start to play. Just the mechanics of the music, yes. But in terms of how if I have a piece and I'm not sure what rhythm I want, I won't tell Jonathan anything. No, just do whatever you think happens with this, and it usually works out great. So I trust his ability, I trust his judgment, I trust his feeling. Same with Kiyoshi. I don't really have to say too much.
Both of those musicians you named, Jonathan and Kiyoshi, I've seen them in variations of different ensembles and musicians, and both of them are very humble brothers. And Jonathan, he's a beast when it comes to drive.
Oh yeah, and that's what I like about him. He kind of kicks me in my butt, and I can't really play safe, with Jonathan. He kind of pushes you, which is definitely a good thing.
Kenny, this is the part of the interview where I ask you, the NEA Jazz Master, as well as instructor, clinician, to reflect on some of the people who were your influences. And I want you to reflect on and tell people why and their technique and what made these musicians so great. The first one I want to ask you about, and I miss this guy. I used to really enjoy watching him play, just watch him play. Hank Jones.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I don't know what you can say about Hank that hasn't been said already. I mean, Hank was a master. He was a master. I got a chance to, I did these tours in Japan called 100 Gold Fingers. I did about 10 of them, and Hank was on just about all of them except the last one that I did. So I got a chance, and they were usually about 2 or 3 weeks long. So I got a chance to hear Hank a lot on those tours. And Hank was the acknowledged master. Whenever he would play, every one of us, 10 other pianists, 9 other pianists, would be standing right there backstage checking Hank out. You know.
He would play like it was effortless for him.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the feeling you got. Like it was so smooth, and that's smooth jazz.
Yeah.
That was smooth jazz. You know. I remember hearing him play the very thought of you, and it floored everybody. You know, playing it solo. You know, it was just so beautiful.
The next one is a Detroit native, and this guy, he's up there in the echelon of Dr. Barry Harris. This guy, Tommy Flanagan.
Oh, Tommy was probably my biggest influence. I first heard Tommy, I guess, when I was in junior high school. A friend of mine played a recording for me, and I looked to see the jacket because I didn't know who he was at the time, Tommy Flanagan, you know. And he's been my hero ever since then. And then I finally got to meet him when I moved to New York, and he was always so busy, Tony Bennett and Ella Fitzgerald. So finally, he was working at Bradley's one time, and I got a chance to meet him, and we talked. And probably the biggest thrill for me was doing a 2-piano record. And it's one of the first times I've been scared. You know, play with your idol. You know, and for me, Tommy was the pinnacle. You know, it was what I loved. The thing that first got me when I first heard him, that one was his touch, lyricism. You know, it was just so melodic. Those two things. You know.
The next one is Wynton Kelly, and I always thought that Wynton played his best when he was with Miles.
You may be right. But I've heard some other things as well.
Wes Montgomery too.
Yeah, Wes Montgomery. But I heard something else with Hank Mobley as well. That was really great. But Hank, Wynton had this. It's just such a joyful player. You know, swing. I mean, he was the essence of swing. And, you know, being from the Caribbean, he had a certain kind of sound. You know, it was just, again, joyful is just the best way. It just always felt good when you heard him. It always felt good.
The last one is a favorite of everybody's, Thelonious Monk.
Oh, well, what can you say about Monk, you know? I think, I can't say that Monk influenced me directly, but he definitely influenced me. But I think his writing more so than his playing, you know. But I started listening to Monk again when I was very, very young, and I guess the things that attracted me to him, his touch was totally different from Tommy or Hank, because Monk was very percussive, and he used dissonances, like in terms of intervals, like minor seconds and major seconds, and sometimes he would use a very wide interval. But also, it was his touch that was very unique, because he had this sense of playing. They called it rhythmic displacement. So in other words, the accents fall where you did not expect them to when he played. You know, they fell in other places. You know, but Monk was just so quirky and so beautiful. But when he played a ballad, you know, like Reflections or Monk's Mood, he'd bring a tear to your eye.
Kenny, the first time you saw Monk, what was your reaction?
I was a little afraid. I'll be honest. I was still very young. I think it was at the being in close proximity. I was at the Vanguard backstage. And he was doing this thing, spinning around, and he was very big. Not fat, but he was just very tall and very very broad. So he was kind of intimidating a little bit. So I don't think I even spoke to him. So I never had a chance to talk to him or speak to him or anything like that. That's much to my chagrin. You know.
Let's go back to Philadelphia. Philadelphia, the Heath brothers, Benny Golson, yourself. I could go on. I mean, Christian McBride. What is it about Philadelphia that has contributed to the jazz scene?
I wish I knew. I mean, so much music came out of Philly, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's proximity to New York. I don't know. Because when I was growing up, there were a lot of clubs, local clubs, where young people could, learn their craft. And then we had two main clubs, Peps and Showboat. And at the time I was really too young to go in there. you know. But I knew Miles would be there, or Cannonball Adderley, or somebody else, So I don't know what it is about Philly, but there was a lot of music. There were a lot of musicians there, I started to meet people my age, I guess when I was about 15 or 16. You know, I had, when I working with the band that my brother was in, they were all older. So I got a certain kind of knowledge from that in terms of tunes and approach. And then around, like I said, around 15 to 16, I started meeting guys, my peers, guys my own age. And that added another layer for me. I started meeting people like Sonny Fortune and Jimmy Vass. I don't know if you know Jimmy. Jimmy Vass, a bass player named Arthur Harper. And they just kind of made me blossom,
Part of your piano style, we talked earlier, you blend Brazilian musical forms to it, but also you have a fluid comping style. And a lot of people say it complements the band musicians as a leader, as you lead the band, but also as an accompanist. Explain that.
My comping style. That's interesting because that's one of the things that's one of the things I kind of got from Tommy. The way he comped. Comping is like another kind of solo. Because when you comp, you have to be melodic then too. It's not just you're not just hitting chords. It should make sense as well as if you just like you're playing a solo.
Like you're off the cuff.
Yeah, yeah. It should be melodic. So that's the best way I can explain it. And then rhythmically, it's important to listen to what everybody else is doing. So a lot of times I hook up with the drummer, and we'll do things together, and it just works out that way. It's not rehearsed or planned. We'll hit certain accents together, and that brings a kind of cohesiveness. But drummers also listen to piano players, So it kind of works like that,
I also did some research. Yusuf Lateef was
wow.
very, very important to you as far as a musician as well as a composer. One of the things I liked about Yusuf, especially when he was with Cannonball Adderley, he was the guy that kind of introduced world music and forms of world music to the fold. And even when he did his solo stuff, you heard Middle Eastern, it was very unique what he was bringing to the jazz idiom.
Yes, and yes, indeed. I mean, one of the first records I saw with Yusuf on it was on Savoy, and he was playing, listed on the list of instruments he was playing was Coke bottles and different things. So he wasn't afraid to try different sounds, and I think that's what's important. He was not afraid to try different sounds. He had this energy and creative curiosity about music from all over the world, So, but especially the Middle East, the Middle East and that area. He was very much interested in that kind of music, and it showed in his writing. It really showed in his writing. But also, he was very, very. I mean, you talking about being avant-garde. He could do that. I saw a video I'd kind of forgotten about. I saw it. We did in Paris, and we did a tune, actually a song of mine, and it went from straight ahead to out to back in and back out again. But he was just so beautiful that way. He could turn on the dime, and bring everybody along with him.
Kenny Barron, this is the last question,
Yeah.
and also the hardest. Kenny Barron, what does jazz music mean to you?
What is jazz to me? Oh, that is the hardest. I mean, you want the long answer, the short answer?
I want you to, from your heart, from the gut.
For me, it's a way for me to express myself, and it's the music that I love. It's the music that moves me. I studied classical piano for 10 years. But then I heard, like Train and other people, and that music really touched my heart. So for me, music is about connecting on an emotional level, not just an intellectual level, but on an emotional level. Trying to move people. I think that's what's important. That's what music for me is about. And that's whatever kind of music you're into, be it R&B. I listen to R&B, Aretha Franklin sometimes would give me chills, but she had that thing. She knew how to connect with people emotionally, You know, that's something I'm still working on. That's an ongoing project.
That'll do it again for another edition of the Pace Report. I'm Brian Pace, reporting from the Jazz Standard here in New York City. I'd like to personally thank the legendary Kenny Barron for his time. Make sure you go out and buy his brand new CD, which is on the Impulse label, which is available on Amazon.com as well as Google Play. I'd like to personally thank Miss Karen Kennedy for arranging my time with Mr. Barron, as well as Grant and the staff here at the Jazz Standard for their warm hospitality. As always, please visit my website, www.thepacereport.com, for my weekly column, as well as my past segments. Until next time, remember, if it's in the groove, it'll make you move. Till next time, peace.